A new investigation takes a closer look at violence and accountability surrounding the U.S. Marshal Services. According to the Marshal Project, at least 177 people were shot by a U.S. Marshal or local police officer helping in an arrest between 2015 and 2020. 124 people died from their injuries, and while marshals are deployed to arrest suspects on federal warrants, nearly two-thirds of arrests were suspects wanted on local warrants. Something to note, no U.S. Marshal has ever been prosecuted following a shooting, and the department does not carry out investigations when a shooting occurs. As more marshals integrate with local police stations, many are asking if it's time for a reform within the department. Simone Weichselbaum joins us now. Simone is a staff writer for the Marshal Project and is a co-author of the report. Simone, thanks so much for joining us. Sorry for messing up your name there as we came into the segment. But walk me through the difference in standards between Marshal Service agents and local officers and the impact it's had on policing and how it's carried out.
Sure. U.S. Marshals are a federal agency. They work under Department of Justice. And those agents and officers don't follow standards that are very common now in big city policing. Standards such as wearing a body camera, deadly use of force. They're allowed to shoot at a moving vehicle. If a federal agent who works for the Marshals or a local officer who's deputized to work with that agency feels that they're under threat, something called imminent danger, they are allowed to use force. A standard which big city police departments like in Chicago and the entire state of New Jersey is moving away from.
So why are agents not held accountable in the same way that local officers are held? And how does this play a role in the conversations around police reform in the U.S. After the summer that we just all witnessed?
Sure. So these agents work for the federal government, which means they answer to either the Justice Department or Congress. Congress is very slow and has not made major reforms in federal law enforcement for almost 2 decades. Same with DOJ. While DOJ goes in to investigate places like the New Orleans Police Department or the Baltimore Police Department, they rarely investigate their own, meaning the FBI or the U.S. Marshals. What made us interested in this story, we found the U.S. Marshals has grown tremendously and now works on the front line of policing, helping local police departments arrest suspects.
So, you know in your reporting that most agents work alongside police organizations. Why do so many police stations need the reinforcement of a federal agency?
Well, we argue in the piece that they actually don't. We found that 1/3 of our shootings occurred in cities under 50,000. And again, 2/3 of those warrants were people wanted on local crimes. So what we found, this isn't happening in places like New York City or Chicago or Los Angeles. We're seeing the integration in small towns and small cities across the country, especially in places like Arizona. Arizona led our database in shootings.
And has the task force outgrown the original purpose it was intended to serve?
Actually, the intended purpose was to help local police department arrest suspects on violent crimes. What we did find, there are people being arrested for felonies, drug crimes, running away from halfway houses. Yes, there are also people arrested for murder and doing terrible things to people. However, we found that the numbers are growing, and they're also growing in small towns and small cities, which is really concerning. When it comes to police reform, it is the big cities that have the lawyers and the activists paying attention, not places in like rural Montana or rural Utah where we found these shootings were happening.
There was, as you know, a significant call by activists to, quote, defund the police. It's something that President Biden has said he's not supportive of. If you were watching the confirmation hearings for Judge Merrick Garland to be the next Attorney General of the United States, he was asked about that by some senators during that hearing, and he sort of reiterated and echoed what President Biden has said. But using that language, defund the police, doesn't mean that just because President Biden says he's not for it, doesn't mean he is also not for some kind of reform of policing in America. What is your understanding of that?
Well, defund the police is something about local policing. Should our local tax dollars be going to this issue? What I'm looking at in my piece is federal law enforcement. Billions of dollars are spent on the federal level in the criminal justice system. And it's something activists and lawyers aren't really examining. A lot of attention is being poured right now looking at big city policing on the local level, rightfully so. But I found egregious abuses, if you will, on the federal level, which gets little attention. And that's something only Congress can regulate, or DOJ, or President Biden can sign an executive order. These are things that aren't really being talked about yet.
Why do you think, Simone, it's gone under the radar for so long?
I think there's this idea that federal law enforcement is the gold standard here in this country. If you recall, after Ferguson or after atrocities in Baltimore and Chicago, people asked, they begged DOJ to come in and investigate that local police department, correct? Few people know that DOJ has its own arm, thousands of federal agents who police our country today, and the DOJ does not regulate its own. And I think people just don't know that.
Was there a sense that we saw some of them in action during some of the protests, though? I mean, there were reports from this news organization and others of federal law enforcement activity in local jurisdictions.
Right. So one of the cases didn't make it into print, but we did report it out, involved a U.S. Marshal in Portland shooting a protester in the head with a rubber bullet. What we found, it's called SOG, it's their Special Operations Group. It's the SWAT team, if you will. So under the Trump administration, they sent that group of U.S. Marshals to police the protests in Portland. And a deputy U.S. Marshal shot a protester in the head with a rubber bullet. That protester had raised a speaker, and that perhaps bothered that deputy U.S. Marshal. But we found in court papers, they argued back, hey, we're not trained to deal with protesters. So again, there's this idea that, oh, if you're a federal agent, especially a federal agent who works on something akin to their SWAT team, you can police any situation. And no, they cannot. In this case, someone was shot in the head with a rubber bullet.
Simone Weichselbaum, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Well, CBS News has reached out to the Department of Justice for a statement regarding the U.S. Marshal Services. They have yet to respond to our requests.